Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's coffee break for March 2023, March 2021, 2023, depending on what time it is, depending on what time zone you're joining us from. AI and ML Beyond the Buzzwords into Reality with Pure1. Joined today by Sandeep. Sandeep, thank you so much for making the time to join today and for the preparation and work. We'll dive in a little bit later to Sandeep's background as we go along here. As always, this is a series, so coffee break series. You can find the previous ones because we try and keep a solution focus. It means they age a little bit better. You can find the previous ones either at that bit.ly link or as well at purestorage.com/events, and you can even see previous ones there. You can tell when I took the screenshot. It's been a month or two. Also, let me make sure I pull down the music here. Also, I want to make sure to highlight for those of you who are attending today. I realize it's partly for the coffee card, but it's also probably because you're somewhat interested in Pure. At least we try and keep it, focused on industry background and details, and then go into what Pure does. But our yearly conference is coming up June 14th to 16th in Resorts World Las Vegas. And rather than me talk about it more than that, there's actually an amazing 42-second video. Thanks to the amazing marketing team here. Let's roll. So I hope that you can join us. I'll be there. I'm not sure who else will be. The virtual option from Jason. Good question, actually. I might actually task some of the folks that are helping us with the background in the chat if they can answer that. A little bit of final housekeeping. As always, I recognize that to some degree, folks join for the coffee card. That's cool. It's part of how it works. First 1,000 attendees, as always, there are some people that we cannot send this to given who you are, but thank you if you're a Pure employee, you're a partner, you're in government or state or SLED. Thank you for joining us today. Finally, in the housekeeping, I'm not going to go introduce myself as I often do, don't as much each month. But when I think about data sets and analysis, for me at least, that was supporting teams that did this stuff. But as often, sometimes I will both kind of co-present. This is one where I'm definitely hosting a little bit more until we get to the final section. We'll try and work in some live demos and I'll do those. But I'm really glad to be joined by Sandeep, given his deep background in this space. Sandeep, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I've been working in this field I loosely call internet infrastructure, because if I go back and look at all the things I've done, I've started with storage, did a little bit of security, good few years of networking, some virtualization, and now back to storage. So this is what makes the internet happens, and I think I'm clearly a person from the internet infrastructure background. So I'm an electrical engineer and spent almost 20 years building products. First half of my career doing engineering, and now the second half of my career essentially trying to tell engineering what to build. Product management.
I love chatting about. We were talking about timing for folks who look up on LinkedIn. There's some founding in there, and even like thinking about like what's the right time to sell and how long do you hold on. I mean, you've lived through multiple different places and waves in the valley, which is cool to hear. As well,
yeah,
for anyone,
I'll say I have something to say on that. I mean, you can do startups, but you need to get the timing right on when to start and when to exit. And I've done two of them. I sold the first one in October 2000. I think that was a good time to sell anything, pretty much, because everything went downhill after that. The second one I started and I sold to Cisco in 2010. And that's the one I feel like maybe I sold a little too early sometimes.
The only other piece here, it was fun actually looking up on Amazon your undocumented Windows NT book for anyone who still needs to learn Windows NT. It's a bargain, and I think it was $94.53 for the copy still on Amazon. So go look it up. And also recognizing that sometimes, as I frankly spent more time in Palo Alto area, I got to know more of what IIT means, Indian Institute of Technology, and have a healthy respect for that, as well as I grew up close to Notre Dame. So growing up in Maryland. So again, thank you for being here. So last little bit of housekeeping. Next month, we'll be joined by Justin Emerson. For those of you who are tracking, we released a new product, FlashBlade E, this month. And we're going to have a little bit of fun. We try and be a little bit humorous, mildly snarky without being over the top, right, kind of thing. So like it says there, the disk dinosaurs never saw it coming. The meteoric, man, now I'm having trouble saying the word, meteoric impact of FlashBlade E. Join us next month. This is also going to be actually a little bit of a continuation of the better science discussion with Brian Gold previously, looking at some of Justin's history at a Pure partner and why he's at Pure, kind of, the being a chronic fixer and building and creating things and use cases actually that are unlocked there. But into this month's topic. As always, we try. I often go with a little bit of a standard agenda style. It's not magic, AI, ML. It's lots of math potentially or repetitive type stuff. So we'll start off with a little bit of just definition. What in the world really is AI and ML beyond the buzzwords, like the title said. Next, going to go deeper in. This is just a host of buzzwords, actually, but there's meaning behind them. We'll actually explore that. And you're going to hear some of Sandeep's background mixed throughout all of this because he's been living this. Then we're going to try and make it a little bit more real from an applications and industry standpoint. And then last but not least, in action at Pure, how we're making your life better with this AI and ML. And specifically in this case, we'll illustrate it with Pure1. And if the demo gods smile on me, we'll even do a live demo or two as we explore some of that. Please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat throughout. We have Emily, Olivia, Matt, and Calvin here to help with that, who all know lots about this stuff as well. So please don't hesitate, and then we'll take questions at the end, as we always do. So to kick it off, Emily or Olivia, whoever can launch poll number 1, if you don't mind. So this is it's meant to be a little bit of maybe a palate cleanser here, or just have some fun with it. So if you could automate any of the tasks, below tasks with AI, what would it be? And if you have other ones that you think like, I wish I could do that, hey, feel free to put it in the chat. And then I'm going to take full credit, more because I don't think anyone else would want to take credit for it, for the answers in question number 2. If you know what GPT stands for, cool. If you just appreciate my sense of humor, as good or not good as it is, feel free to pick some of the other answers. But we'll leave that running up here for a second. So Sandeep, starting out here, this is I think AI and ML is almost about as buzzwordy as it gets in some cases.
That is true.
So do you mind kind of starting helping out? And maybe I'll just put this up, and I know you're going to talk around this for a while. I know for you, it even starts with ML and then the others are related, but just help us out with thinking about the categories and what they mean here.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI, artificial intelligence, this, subject has fascinated us, for decades. I mean, this is not a new word at all. It has been around for maybe 60, 70 years now, maybe even longer. It's the whole field that relates to developing something that can act and think and do things like humans. Whether it is computers, whether it is programs, whether it is robots, anything that can think like a human, act like a human, pretty much imitate a human, falls under the realm of artificial intelligence. So that's the broader definition. Pretty much everything that I feel we are doing today, and you hear people talking about the NVIDIAs, the Googles, and so on. To me, is largely powered by what is in that second circle inside, which is machine learning. Machine learning is actually a pathway to AI. So it's all about enabling the machine to learn and recognize patterns from data. Everything starts with the data here. So as you have more data, there are techniques developed to recognize patterns from that data, whether it is trying to understand what is written, trying to read what the text is, trying to understand images, you name it, even trying to convert what is the said word into what is the written word.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are, patterns, and trying to understand those patterns is machine learning's job number one. There's a lot of techniques to do that. So that's how I differentiate between those two.
And what I found interesting when you and I were chatting was for you, it's almost like it's all machine learning, or that's even though there it kind of shows concentric circles. To you, machine learning is at the core of that. And then there's even a couple different concepts there that then eventually wander into AI and ML. You mind continuing?
Yeah. So essentially, the techniques that machine learning brings, I would say broadly fall into three categories, shown by those three medium-sized circles. One is the supervised learning, that red pink circle that you see there. And whenever there's lots of labeled data, which means, you sort of know, hey, this is the answer to this. This is a cat. This is a picture of a cat. When you have a lot of labeled data, this is the technique used, where you train the model, which is the effective learning of any machine learning endeavor, is to build a model. So when you have lots of data and you use it to train that model, that is called supervised learning. So it's kind of like, you're supervising, making sure, it knows exactly what is what. And then once it's sufficiently trained, it's able to then, sort of pick out the cats from all the pictures and so on, right? Mm-hmm. So that's supervised learning. To be very contrasted with what's on the left-hand side, the unsupervised learning, wherein, you sort of just hand over the data to these machine learning technique, these algorithms, and say, what can you tell me about this data? This is often used when you're trying to segment groups of customers or groups of users into various clusters. Machines, there are techniques to easily differentiate. You don't even know how many groups there are. So this technique will tell you there's 5 groups, and here they are, and sort of cluster those users or customers by those. So that's a very unsupervised technique where not a lot of human help is needed in this. Mm-hmm. And the third one is sort of half and half in some sense. At the bottom there's reinforcement learning, where you train the model and then you start giving it feedback, saying, yeah, I think you got it right, thumbs up, or hey, I think you got this part wrong, can you go improve on it? So that's with the feedback loop. That third technique is reinforcement learning, and this is heavily used in robotics. So when you're training something, you sort of keep telling that machine or model or program, saying it's doing good, it's not doing good, and it improves based on that. So if you've heard of the popular programs developed to play chess with humans or play Go with humans, and now they're doing extremely well, better than any human. Those were all developed using reinforcement learning.
And even I think you were saying Chat GPT, because probably everyone's heard about that. It's a combination of two even there.
Absolutely. Chat GPT uses a combination of supervised, semi-supervised, that's one more subdivision there, and reinforcement learning. Chat GPT has really used a lot of different techniques, not some of these basic ones, but some additional ones that have been developed over the last few years. And with lots of data, it has really trained a very complex model. But for anybody looking to understand what is machine learning about, it's really a combination of one or more of these techniques, using the right kind of data and right kind of supervision.
So, and even there, I was thinking of this is way back. We didn't even talk about this. I think Amazon for a while has a service, maybe they still do, called Mechanical Turk, where like people could actually identify things and provide the training of like, is there a cat in this image and that kind of thing. So this is for anyone who remembers that one. Okay, so base definition. Thank you. Hopefully I didn't cut off anything you were going to add in there more. I think we're into section 2.
Cool. I mean, there's more techniques that have come up, but I'm sure we'll talk about them in future. Generative AI is one more technique where now the machine starts generating more data. So we'll talk about it when we go further into the conversation.
So I'm going to close out poll number 1 here, and I will share it back to everybody. So let's share the results here, just because that's part of the fun. You can kind of see how you did. So or not how you did in this case. This is just like, what do you think? So if you could automate any of the below tasks with AI, I think you're seeing this, Sandeep. We're actually pretty evenly split here. It's a mix of do my job for me, pay my bills, go to meetings for me, and even what's for dinner. So, and that was a multi-select, by the way, so people could choose multiple.
Yeah, I didn't realize the big market for what's for dinner. That's
that feels more like you're at the end of the day and it's just decision fatigue. I can't make any more decisions. Just get something I like, kind of thing.
like a
And then
business opportunity.
and do you mind helping out? So Sunday, but what does the GPT and Chat GPT stand for?
Yes. So the poll has closed on that.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Okay.
Generalized
So,
prescriptive technology.
yeah.
No, actually, no. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not that. It's generative pre-trained transformer. That's the long form of GPT.
Mm-hmm.
And every word has a lot of meaning attached to it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute. But Chat GPT is really taking that very complex language model and using it to interact with humans in a chat format. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard this buzzword Chat GPT by now. A lot of you have probably tried it out. A company called OpenAI has announced it about 4 months ago, and you can go get an account and you can ask it pretty much anything, and it has this fantastic ability to come up with a very elaborate and confident sounding response to your question. And the questions can be in text. You could ask it to write a poem, you could ask it to write an essay, you could give it constraints, you can sort of change the constraints based on the response you get, and the program is able to do a fantastic job, much better than a human probably in some cases.
Especially the confident. I literally saw one this morning where someone trained it on Steve Jobs' voice with audio input and actually is getting back, like, how did COVID affect Apple spoken in Steve Jobs' voice. So we're starting to enter some pretty crazy territory, which actually that feels like a segue into number 2. And for those who caught the typo, good for you, good catch. That's my fault, typing up the poll questions. But going deeper, there is a good bit underneath the covers here, whether it's around image processing, text processing. We've got some acronyms in there and more. Olivia or Emily, if you don't mind launching the second poll, and we will just go ahead and leave that up there. And actually, I'm just going to leave this up because curious of what everyone is doing for AI. We'll share these results back. But Sandeep, do you mind actually kind of taking through a little bit of some of these deeper layers and what's involved?
Yes, absolutely. So going a little bit deeper, I mean, we talked about the 3 basic techniques, supervised, unsupervised, and, reinforcement learning techniques. As you look to analyze more complex patterns, newer techniques or rather more complex techniques are used. And we'll talk primarily about image recognition, text recognition, and Chat GPT a little bit. So the way
yeah, keep going. So it started out with text.
Sorry.
No, keep going.
Okay. The way the whole image recognition works is that by nature images sort of think of it like let's say 100 pixel by 100 pixel image, and contrast it's something that is very easy to split up into smaller pieces and process. As a result, some of the models that are developed to process these images, they are, one of the most common ones is called convolutional neural network. And the way it works is it sort of breaks the image into smaller chunks. Think of it like a 4x4 window and slides that across the 100 by 100. And it is able to extract little features from that image. So there might be a line, there might be a point, there might be a circle, there might be a triangle. So if it's trying to analyze, let's say, the picture of a cat, if you give it sufficient images of a cat, it will start realizing that, cats have 2 ears and they're shaped in this fashion. They have 2 eyes and they're shaped in this fashion. And they'll soon be able to, contrast from images of dogs where, these features may be slightly different. Maybe the ears are longer or, they're shaped differently and so on. So by nature, image recognition or image processing is very easy to parallelize, and one can throw a lot of compute power at it and make it go faster. The reason I'm talking about this parallelization is this was a huge shortcoming when it came to text analysis. When you think of text, I mean, just think of if you open one page of a book. Whereas, if you have a one page with one large picture, it would take you probably a second to read that picture and understand what's going on. You couldn't do that with a page of text. You would have to read it line by line to understand. Text is by nature very sequential. You have to read words in that sequence. Every word has context based on the words around it. And that is true for images as well, but by naturally, we are very good at reading image. Maybe the way our brain or maybe the visual cortex is built, it does parallel processing. But in case of text, this is something that I think humans invented. Language is invented by humans, and it's very sequential by nature. And what happened is, the text learning algorithms, the natural language processing algorithms, up until 5 years ago, as a result, were very sequential in nature. They needed to keep in, remember, what were the last 20 words in order to understand what was the meaning of a sentence. And that made it very hard to train a model with large quantities of data. So if I needed a model that, sort of captured the gist of an entire book, it would take hours, days to process that. Imagine if you wanted to, sort of capture the essence of the entire Wikipedia. It was nearly impossible because of this very serial nature of the algorithms. And that's because of text being very serial and sequential. So it was not possible to do some of these things. What changed about 5 or 6 years ago is a group of researchers at, I think, Google Brain. They came up with some new ideas around how to positionally encode the text so that its position can be remembered. And then they brought in some new concepts called, self-attention, which is really putting weightage on words as to how they relate with other words in a sentence, other words in a paragraph, and so on. So they essentially created this heat map of how does a given word relate to any other word. This made it parallelizable. So this made it suddenly possible to process very large sentences and also do it in a parallel fashion, which means you can throw more hardware, you could have more GPUs process it, and it would happen much faster. So that's where ChatGPT is today. ChatGPT, I'm told, is able to process, firstly, it has been trained with all the text knowledge in the public internet, the Wikipedias, all the books, scientific papers, 95 some languages. So it really understands how human language works, how the words have meaning based on the context, and it is able to generate new language using that. It's able to process 3,000 words. And then I just heard, last week they launched a newer version of GPT, which can now, essentially process 25,000 words. So if you ask it to write a book, probably it could. So I think what has happened is we started with, image processing, which was naturally parallelizable. And then now we've made the text processing also parallelizable. And so with ChatGPT, I think this has really changed the world. Now you can pretty much, give this program your bar exam or your SAT, and it's able to do better than 90% grade. So I don't know how this changes education or, getting admissions into universities and exams, but this is really going to impact the world very quickly. So, that in a nutshell is, how some of these processings are working. I mean, we are still talking at a very, 20,000 foot level or a 50,000 foot level here. But I mean, that's what has happened, what has changed over the last 5 or 6 years is, this whole, self-attention and, being able to process large quantities of data very fast. And
Especially
of course,
text.
Moore's law has helped, computing has gotten faster and, cheaper and smaller and all of that.
We're going to have a kind of a, frankly, a promotion later at the end for a session that you're doing actually at NVIDIA GTC. We thought about talking of some of the stages of building ML models. If you're interested in hearing more about some of this, because we're going to jump into the use cases now, make sure to look at the NVIDIA GTC session that Sandeep recorded. And we'll actually have a link for that toward the end. But as a teaser of you can go way deeper on this, which is part of why you're here, even though I appreciate you summarizing it.
I'll just take the 5 more seconds to make one
please.
more point on this previous thing. The Chat GPT, because it's such a buzzword these days, the model is so large that it has 175 billion parameters. And there's no way this can run on your phone or on a smaller computer. This requires massive compute power today. And it can only run in the cloud. So there's a whole concept around model compression that has come about, and we'll hopefully get to talk about it later on.
So for those of you who participated in the second poll, thank you. It was almost 1,000 folks. So curious, and this is all just fascinating to see, and hopefully it even gives you attending a sense of where you may be relative to your peers, kind of thing. So how far along is your organization in the use of AI? It looks like there's a more of I'm not sure and exploration. There's a healthy minority though, 20% that are actually more exploring it, and some that are actually pretty far along. And biggest challenges, and actually the top 3 seem pretty evenly split. Any commentary there, Sandeep, before we keep going?
No, I'm glad people are looking to become more and more aware, because the world is, AI is going to thrust itself into our lives very soon. So the sooner we do it, the better. I'm glad to see a lot of people are already adopting or looking to adopt it heavily.
Section number 3. Let's start to make it a little bit real from a general standpoint. So this is being used already, and I think we all have some sense of this probably, whether on social media or we're shopping or we go to the doctor. I mean, there or in financial stuff and various advertising targeting. So we decided to kind of pick a couple industries here, being real. Some of these industries Pure plays in, and we help the companies do what they do. But I think we'll dive into here: retail, social media, and healthcare. And when Sandeep and I were talking about this, it's because like all of these should be. I'm pretty sure everybody goes shopping. Everyone is on social media in some way, or you're affected by it, even if you're not. And then we all are human, and we have to go to the doctor periodically. So do you mind kind of walking through a little bit from starting with retail about kind of the use cases and challenges there?
Sure. I've worked with a high-end retailer that had something like 4,000 product categories, something like 35 million customers logging in, buying their products. Lot of data, nearly 300 million transactions a year. One of the things that these retailers end up doing, and this is true for anything that's retail. I mean, even if you look at airlines, they're retail, they're selling to you as an individual. If you look at casinos, they're catering to clients. You look at the retail when we go to, let's say, the Walmart or a Target or a Macy's or so on. These are all big retailers. They really need to understand you as a customer, and you are not the same. You are different from the guy sitting next to you and so on. And it's very important for them to really cluster these and segment these customers. They have these people who are the people who just go and buy. They don't look at price. They don't look at coupons. They're not looking to save. There's a very small group of that, but there are people who will just go and buy. There are those who actually will go and only buy certain things in the stores. So they really need to understand what type of a customer are you. So in some sense, and I always say this, You do 5 transactions with one retailer and they have slotted you. They have figured you out. They're
In a
going to put
category.
you in one of their clusters. And guess what? As soon as they have done that, now, their behavior towards you is going to be, they have something to base it on. So you'll start getting coupons in the email if you're that, the customer who sort of, hey, I got a $20 off for spending $100. I'll go to the store to use that coupon. Then you're going to get more of those. So they get very good at, what kind of products do you buy, what time of the year you buy them. What is your typical budget for that store in a year? That's what is called customer lifetime value. So they actually build a CLV model for every customer they have. And let's say by halfway or 3/4 of the way through the year, you haven't spent that money. Guess what? They're chasing you because they know you got $1,000 to spend that you haven't. So typically around October or November, you're going to start getting these promotions because it's Christmas time. They know you're going to cough up that money. So they use a combination of customer segmentation, slotting you, and then trying to figure out what's your propensity, what's your annual budget, and they start making recommendations based on that. So this is a very well thought through business, and even how they contact you is AI driven. Whether you get a flyer in the mail, what has worked with you in the past, they'll keep doing more of that. Is it a text? Is it an email? So the retail has really figured this out for quite some time. We all know Amazon will recommend us other things to buy. All of that is part of this whole personalized recommendations that the retail has mastered. And this is coming into all industries. This is slowly but steadily coming to all industries. Yeah.
I think, and there I even think of there was like the story that folks can look up of Target contacting a father and a daughter, and it was actually a little bit awkward. It was in the news a while back, but it's that good sometimes. Let's think about, and just being candid, I'm watching time here. So let's, I know there's challenges here around data volume and changing customer behavior. Any quick comments there before we jump to social media?
I think the biggest challenge for these retailers is really the amount of transactions and the frequency. They follow the typical marketing principle. They look at the frequency, they look at the recency of your transaction, they look at the monetary value of their transactions. And those 3 are sort of key data points they collect about you, and that's how they figure you out. They often use third-party data about you. They sort of try to figure out, hey, are you married? Do you own a home? They get all that data from third parties, mash it up, and that's how they figure out what should be the recommendation for you.
And being real, like we're all human, so we can see this can be used for great reasons, actually, to make sure there's inventory and supply and what you want, but also we can see the opposite flip side. These are all tools that can be used well and as well.
That's the thing with AI. I think, if we don't use it responsibly, there can be trouble. So here again, I'll be quick. I think, very similar, all of us use, some social media or the other, whether it is Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, what have you. We are getting things in the news feed that nobody else necessarily is getting. And it's, again, it's very personalized for you. And, whenever I say the word personalized, it means a lot of data points have been picked up. You have been put in a cluster. The attributes of the cluster sort of determine what might be of interest to you. And, the challenge, I'll jump to the challenge, and we all know this challenge very, very well, which is, the model bias. Elections have been won and lost because of the political bias that some of these models have had, but it can suffer from a lot of different biases. So that's one of the challenges when implementing AI in social media. But I think it's heavily used. Facebook wouldn't be Facebook if they did not do contact suggestions and personalizing the ads and so on.
This is now even at a little bit of a philosophical level. If you have a friend and you say, I like this thing, they'll recommend more of that to you. But then does that mean that you start to be in an echo chamber and not hearing other perspectives, et cetera? So these are AI questions. You're kind of human friend questions, and sometimes are we creating our own echo chambers? Now we're getting super philosophical and cultural, but it's there.
There is some of that. There is some of that. I mean,
Yeah.
there is the echo chamber effect, but there are also people having these guardrails built on top of these models to, sort of not, drink their own Kool-Aid, sort of, and just go out of control there.
Last but definitely not least, maybe actually the most important one, because this cuts to the very core of who we are at a physical human level. Let's think about healthcare.
Yeah, so I worked very closely with a very large diagnostic, healthcare diagnostic company, and I got to see firsthand, where they were beginning to use AI. They were in the early stages, but I think some of the cases I definitely saw that all of us can relate to. Medical imaging analysis. I think nowadays, the doctors use AI as a co-pilot. It's the doctors can easily read an X-ray and figure out what's going on, but it's always good if the AI sort of helps them and points out areas they should pay attention to.
Yeah.
I think this will only get better, maybe to a point that it may even get better than majority of the doctors. But this is a big field of investment. Looking for malignancy through various types of imaging charts, whether it is X-rays or MRI or so on. This is a big area of application. In addition, just like in retail or in other places, there is tons of medical data. What kind of treatment you received, what were your health parameters over the years, drawing insights from those, analyzing them. And this is not necessarily very structured data. In retail, everything is, transactions in a database. Here you got charts, you got all pictures, images, things that came out of a printer, all of those, right? So it's a much more complex problem. And surprisingly, a lot of text analysis gets used in the medical industry because doctors have written notes about you, and there's this text mining that happens to figure out which kinds of patients need more care based on the historical records. And finally, the really hot field of genomics, where we as humans, our DNA is extremely unique, and trying to figure out the which sequence or which genome controls what, and then what are the exclusions for certain types of drugs. This is a very hot area. So every time they come up with a drug, they try to make sure it covers majority of the user base, for lack of patient base, I should say. And if there are exclusions, then they're able to sometimes detect them ahead of time. If any of you have done 23andMe analysis of your DNA, just from the sheer data they have gathered, they're able to call out that, hey, you are more likely to have allergies, you are more likely to have asthma, you're more likely to be a cat person, whatever they can figure out, they'll figure out and pass on those insights. But the point here is that DNA as a source of data is getting mined, and mash that with this whole process, this whole drugs and the impact of drugs. I think this is a huge area of investment for AI. I am not even going to touch upon the application of AI in pharma, where they have made great advances. There's a program or a project, I should say, called AlphaFold, which has really helped figure out how the proteins look like very rapidly, thanks to AI.
Emily Olivia, if you don't mind going and launching the third poll. Thank you, Sandeep. I'm hoping that this is one that is a little more coffee break that's a little more deeper educational than some we've done. That's thanks to what you're going through. I hope everyone appreciates that. If you like it, feel free to say so in the chat or not to, because we want to know both ways. I'm just going to leave up here the poll of, which industry or AI use case is most exciting to you. If you have other ones, please put it in the chat. Heads up, we will probably go a little bit past the 45-minute mark here. So if you're staying around for the drawing at the end, which we will be doing for an Ember coffee mug, stick with us. But we wanted to make sure this is a Pure Storage, event. What a surprise! We want to keep it educational, but we also wanted to show you why someone like Sandeep is here. Like, because and he's not the only one. Like, you're in a product management role. We have engineers that are actually writing the code around this stuff. So thinking about Pure1, if you were with us about a year and a half ago, give or take, year and 3-4 months ago, we actually did a previous coffee break on Pure1, a little bit of the origin and the history, and then a live demo for 20 minutes with Kyle Keller. So we thought what we'd do today is kind of continue the Pure1 theme and illustrate some of what Sandeep has just talked about via examples in Pure1. Talk a little bit about the AI side of it. For 2 of these, I'll see if I can pull off a little bit of a live demo. So diving right in. A classic challenge, if you're in the storage industry, is thinking about what does it look like when I run out of something, or how long until something. That's capacity, it's controllers, etc. So there's this ability around hardware simulation. I love the term. I think it was digital twin you mentioned. Do you mind kind of talking about the AI
Yes.
side of this?
Yeah, essentially, all hardware is very complex in terms of its performance characteristic. I mean, I wish it was simple that I increase the throughput rate and the performance goes up. It's not linear, and it's not even a two-dimensional thing. Our hardware, just like any other hardware, it depends on so many different factors. The I/O size, the DRR, the compression rate, what kind of data you're using, what app are you running. So what we have done is we have modeled the behavior of hardware under varying conditions, and we let you simulate the performance of that hardware for conditions that you haven't yet experienced, but you can simulate them and say, how will I do this Christmas? Will this thing survive the surge in demand? I think those are the kind of questions you should be able to answer with this.
But even to show that a little bit, so in this case, I'm in Pure1. Being real, this is a demo environment. It's where there's lots of arrays that are not doing what they should do because it's a demo environment, internal lab environment. So we've got one array here. We're in the analytics section underneath planning. You can actually see if we take an array. I wouldn't sort it on load. That's kind of a combined metric of how busy is an array, because it's more than just CPU. And you can actually go here and see, it actually tells you projected load, and you can either right here say simulate hardware, or up at the top, simulate hardware. And you can say, well, this is an X90 today. What if I took that up non-disruptively? That's part of Evergreen. You can do it without downtime. What if I took that to say the biggest box that's out there, an XL170? Takes a second, crunching a huge amount of data. Suddenly the load metric, that here was going to hit 100% within 90 days. We've actually got a reset level of that. It's still doing a lot of work. We look at it from a capacity standpoint. We could even go, in this case, I only changed the controller, but if I chose here to actually go and change some of the data packs, I could, and we could even see what the capacity looks like, and that's taking into account what we see under the covers with inline and post-process deduplication and compression. Because as humans, that stuff gets a little bit hard to track. How reducible is your data? That's why we have a storage array to figure that stuff out for us. So this is stuff that I used to actually, as a partner SE and as a customer, I would have to do NAR data or auto supports, and then you do manual analysis, and you kind of guess based on personal experience. You can do this as a customer, and even if you choose not to use it, your SE can use it to give that much better recommendations to you. So the other piece there is, and this is now a more, I hate how little time we're giving to some of these because they're so amazing. We also do this for workload simulation. If someone says, man, I want to run a couple more copies of this application, what does that look like on the storage array? Capacity, data reduction makes that interesting to figure out. But what actually about the load? Is it running at the same times or not? So back to you, Sandeep, for a little bit on workload.
Yeah, and not just scaling your existing loads, but let's say you want to run a completely different application. Let's say you're running Oracle, but you want to now repurpose this array for running SAP or VMware. We can simulate that for you. So even the loads that you don't have, we can simulate. And you could say, I really want a large VMware installation on this array, and we can tell you how the performance and capacity will behave.
Well, even there, I'll just drag across here for a second. If I go and say on here, I can say in that exact same screen, I can say simulate new workload. It's right up here. And either I can choose a workload on the array, or I can go and choose a generic-ish workload, as you mentioned. So let's, for instance, choose Oracle's kind of a big deal for most people that run it. So we want to simulate an Oracle workload, or even more valuably, I can go and actually simulate a workload that matches one that's already on the array. And that's super powerful. Okay. I think there's also a piece there. We've taken it even further into this idea of intelligent recommendations. Back to you.
Yeah. So, just like we talked about in the retail, we can make recommendations. I think, when I came to Pure, I started pushing for this idea that, hey, look, we have all this customer data, and it's not really your private data, but just the metadata, which is, data about your data. Just based on that, we are able to tell, hey, looks like you're going to run out of space in 3 months. You are not going to be able to handle this December this year. So why don't we do something about it? And what we are doing is now we are proactively sending you these recommendations. And this is not just based on the simple projection of your load curve. We also look at how have you managed such highs in the past? Does this really impact your latency? If this is not really causing any problem for you, we're not going to call you. We're not going to recommend you. But if it looks like you're going to be in some real trouble, we'll have these proactively generated recommendations shown here by the light bulb. And then in addition, this third one on the right, we also let our systems engineers who work closely with you, who understand your business, let them make any custom recommendations for you. All the things considered that they know about you, they are in the best position to recommend something for you. So these will come to you, and all you have to do is, yeah, looks good. Can you give me a quote for it? So I think this is a new thing that we have started in the last 1 year, and it's completely data driven.
Sustainability, energy, carbon, energy cost. There's all this stuff. It varies based on the geography you're in, the size of company. I think we were even talking about what your energy bills have done in the last year or two, Sandeep. Yeah. So I'll let you keep going here, and then I'll pull up another demo.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way this is going is, I live in California, and my energy company, PG&E, sends me a bill and tells me, hey, you are 50th percentile of your neighbors, which means I'm not like the best energy user.
You're not the worst.
And not the worst. So I take some heart in that. But there are months when I've done badly because probably my kids have turned up the heater all the way, and I have been slacking on my job to turn it down every time they turn it up. So I think we're going to do something similar and at least help our customers understand how they are doing in terms of their energy usage. If they have a set of arrays, we'll identify the arrays where they are underutilizing something or overutilizing the power part of it. And soon also you'll see in other screens, even call out recommendations they can, things they can do to improve that. Mm-hmm. Such as maybe, as you see here, swap out certain SAS flash modules. We have more power efficient modules available. Maybe that's the reason why that particular array is, consuming a lot of power. So we have sort of a complete sustainability assessment view for customers that are very, very, tuned to, the sustainability aspect of it, as well as, the power bill aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a very useful screen for customers to look at. How am I doing with respect to my power consumption, with respect to my peers, my neighbors, so to say.
If you haven't looked at this, make sure to. We actually just launched a 2.0 version of the data protection assessment that you see here. In the interest of time, I won't click on it, but go look at it yourself too. And sustainability. This is one thing that sometimes I think about if I'm talking with folks that are, admins or engineers. This may be something, an area that's a board level initiative, a C-suite level initiative and focus. And having knowledge and even data here can actually make you more relevant up the org chart in a good way for your career, kind of thing. And maybe either just because it's an executive initiative, it may be due to very real costs that they're looking at. Okay, last but not least here is what if you say, hey, that all sounds interesting, but I'm not really in a CapEx world anymore in a purchase. I want an on-prem as a service, consumption-driven experience where in theory, Pure just takes care of a lot of this store for me. What do we have for those people?
Yeah, so we have launched Evergreen 1 some time back, and this is very much pay-as-you-go service, which means you just sign up for a fixed amount of capacity license at a certain performance tier, and whether we ship one array or two arrays or three arrays to meet that capacity, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to pay for the arrays themselves. You just get a monthly bill. And through Pure1, you can see what your monthly usage, how is it tracking? Are you likely to go into on demand in the near future, as is shown here on the screen? That red line is sort of your
Reserved commit, pre-discounted amount.
Right. So it looks like in a couple of months, this particular customer is likely to cross that line and go into on demand. In which case, he can simulate, hey, what if I just raise that by another 20 terabytes? Would that cover me for the next few months? So we have this thing at the bottom, sort of, how many miles to empty for this particular type of service tells you you're good for the next 4 months, and you don't have to worry. So it helps you manage your minutes, so to say, to use the cell phone analogy, and sort of it helps you plan a little bit into the future and stay clear of the on-demand charges.
We did a great session with Paul Ferraro last year on Evergreen 1. It was called Pure as a Service at the time, even though, the burst is good because you didn't pay ahead of time. You can burst up and down. But this is where this starts to feel a little different than your regular storage company or your way better than average storage company that the Pure is, right? This is now going into even more feeling like cloud type storage, but delivered on-prem with capabilities. Even we mentioned before, the workload simulation, the hardware simulation, the intelligent recommendations, that even if you're purchasing a storage service from Pure, consumption-based, we use that stuff under the covers to deliver you a better service, right? It only makes sense.
Yep.
So we are at the home stretch at the very end here. I'm going to actually end and share this one poll here for folks to look at briefly, and we'll get right to the drawing. So in case you were curious, it looks like actually IT and security management, we've got to get great question. We'll answer on that in a second here. But it's across the board here. There's no crazy outliers. And then as well, if we could go ahead and launch the fourth poll, and as we close it out and do the drawing, but if you could launch that, Olivia, that'd be great. And this is just it's a little bit of a self-serving question, but genuinely curious of, do you actually know about these capabilities? Are you using them or not? Or maybe you're on a platform that doesn't have these. So I'll just let that sit for a minute. Hopefully you feel like you learned a good bit today, both at a general level from this space, kind of what it really is beyond the buzzwords, like we said, how it's being used some of the real world. And even though we made the summary version, we're really doing stuff in this space around Pure that actually helps you and makes your life better. Sandeep, thank you, as I knew you would be, for being such a great guest. If you want to hear more, please go and look up NVIDIA GTC online. Actually, I think we were talking right before this. The sessions are now active. So you can actually hear a version of what Sandeep covered, but more tuned toward an audience that's specifically focused on AI and ML. Frankly, it goes a little bit deeper, as it should, kind of thing. And if you were waiting for the drawing, let me make sure I get it right here. Brian S. from Utah. You are the proud winner, hopefully happy winner, of an Ember mug, retail value $130, the kind you can control with your phone, both because it's cool and actually it's kind of worthwhile if you want to keep your tea at your Darjeeling tea, maybe Sandeep, at an even temperature for a very long time. And please join us next month, where I'll be hosting Justin Emerson, FlashBlade technology evangelist, around having a little bit of fun with the concept of disk, and is disk on its way out of the data center? Just maybe. We'll talk about that. And I think we are now at questions and answers. So I will actually, just to give a little bit of the relaxed feel here, we will pull up the music a little bit, not too much. And this is where we are officially done for folks that need to leave. You need to get a bio break before your next meeting. That's all cool. But we're going to hang out for a minute for Q&A. And I'll actually close this poll here and send the results back. End poll, and we will share results. So we had a solid 21% people that knew about these features and used them. That's awesome. For 34% of you, hey, you learned something that'll make your life better. That's cool. And then there's some other people that would want to be on Pure instead. And to those of you, actually, I'm genuinely curious if you're on a platform that does all of this already. If you even just reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, I'd be curious to hear what you are, what you're doing. We have competitors in the space, and we have friends all over the place. But what we're doing here, best of my knowledge, is going further than just about anybody else.
I just want to mention there's a whole bunch of things we didn't talk about today that we are working on that are AI/ML driven. And,
please.
As soon as we're ready to talk about those, you'll probably see them on our website or maybe in the conversation. I just want to drop the word anomaly detection. That's a space we are doing a lot of active work in, and stay tuned.
Yeah, and that one's even a little bit public because there are some patents filed and issued around that area on Pure's side. I'm super fortunate that my name is on one of those patents, along with some other people. It wasn't just me. So yes, we're doing stuff there. It's semi-public if you go search the patent database. I think looking at questions, there were a couple here. Matt and Calvin have been awesome about keeping up with the questions. Thank you. There was one I wanted to highlight just because it was an interesting food for thought when it's in the answered section here. Okay. But it's a little bit thought provoking, and you might be like, "Hey, are they going to take that one on the live?" Yeah, we will. So this is actually someone asking about, could an attacker train a language model such as ChatGPT, generate code that exploits vulnerabilities in software applications, to carry out attacks? And this is, I think we were alluding to this a little bit earlier, Sandeep. I mean, this is a tool that can be used for good purposes or malevolent purposes, whichever terms we want to use. So I have coworkers that already are using this. They think about security. They don't put pure identifiable information in, but to actually do the basic framework of like PowerShell scripting to develop loops and if-thens and that kind of stuff. Any other thoughts on your end, Sandeep?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the bigger concerns that, ChatGPT team itself has been very aware of. And they have, according to, everything I've seen on the web, for the next version, they've put in serious guardrails to make sure that, they're part of the adversarial, usage of ChatGPT. They have put in several guardrails to prevent not only nefarious, but also, kind of things that are socially unacceptable. So they've put in a bunch of guardrails to prevent that. Having said that, is it foolproof? No, nobody is even claiming GPT is foolproof. It is error-prone, and could there be an error in their guardrail? All of those things are possible. But I think this is one of the top challenges for AI, which is to stay responsible and to prevent nefarious use of AI. I think that's going to be a huge challenge going on, and there'll be a focus on that.
I've thought over the years, any technology is an accelerator. It's a force multiplier. What we're multiplying toward or what we're accelerating toward, that's a human decision.
Absolutely.
There's one other one here that I wanted to pull up. And maybe we'll make this the last one because it's just a little bit of a interesting thought experiment. So can AI totally phase out human labor? Am I redundant? Are you redundant? Kind of thing. I've thought about this actually some, and even in the past, like the job that I do did not exist when I was a kid. Some jobs did. My father was in finance, for instance, kind of thing. But even that's dramatically changed, like quantitative into quants. That didn't exist back when I was a kid, kind of thing. So, but there's always opportunities there, and I'd personally rather be the one leading in to the changes than having the change like pushed on top of me, kind of thing. Any other thoughts there, Sandeep?
No, I totally agree. I think, if you look at the last 100 years, every time new automation of any kind has come in, it has pushed out jobs and new ones have got created, right? Those who embraced automation, were at the leading edge of finding those new jobs. So I think the cycle will continue. It's sort of speeding up a little too quickly.
The iteration cycles.
Yeah, I think the changes are coming far more rapidly than they have in the past. But I guess that acceleration has always been there. So, the pace of change is always been ever increasing, and it just feels like it is faster than ever. So embrace it.
I think with that, we are right at time, 59 minutes after the hour for me. Thank for those who are still with us, which is actually the vast majority of you. Want to make sure to do a final reminder. You can use the QR code, or you can go to purestorage.com/events to register for the coffee break next month. Hope to see you then. Sandeep, thank you again for being such a great guest. Hope to see you all next month.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.